Hello everyone. Today we talk about social protection and climate change in developing countries. The topic of today's podcast is a bit technical. I'll try to make it as accessible for as many people as possible and for everybody to see how this is an important aspect to consider for a more sustainable society. According to the UNICEF, social protection covers the range of policies and programs needed to reduce the lifelong consequences of poverty and exclusion. Programs like cash transfer, including child grants, school meals, skill development, and more. They help connect families with healthcare, nutritious food, and quality education to give all children, no matter what circumstances they are born into, a fair chance in life. So I attended a webinar on this topic. It was organized by the International Institute for Environment and Development. It went more in depth about gender inequalities in social protection, especially in the context of climate change in developing countries such as Tanzania or Bangladesh. The first message is that social protection is essential for managing exposure to climate change. Indeed, in the short term, a social protection helps vulnerable population to cope with the stress, to recover from the stress associated with climate change. In the long term, social protection can be used as a tool to adapt to climate change by anticipating the required adaptations in livelihoods of people. So social protection is about how to protect people from social hazards such as poverty or diseases, and climate hazards, which seem to affect women more strongly than men. More than gender inequalities, it is gender equity that is at stake here. As women tend to be more exposed to climate change, social protection needs to ensure that more vulnerable populations get the resources they need to cope with the climate situation. However, social protection is not a panacea solution. It comes with a fair number of downsides and risks, especially for women. Therefore, it's important to have a gendered perspective on the topic. Social protection can happen through humanitarian programs like UNICEF programs or microcredits or real loans, but it seems that women get access to the microcredits and that formal loans are mostly attributed to men. The main problem here is that microcredits is very costly. It comes with big interest rates, so a lot more to pay than the formal credit. Informal loans are also an option, mostly for women, and they come with high interest rates as well. Thus, those are not satisfactory options, as the financial social protection ends up costing a lot to women. In other words, the financial burden of climate change is heavier on women than it is on men. Another problem is that in developing countries, so-called social protection programs have sometimes bad outcomes. For instance, in Uganda, they reported women who faced violence because they received money in cash as help from a program. Or another example, in northwest Tanzania, a study proved that social protection in fact does not reduce gender-based violence, it even tends to increase it. And this is because in a context of resource scarcity, it's dangerous to throw money in the equation. Before taking the decision to launch this kind of program, the program needs to prepare and make sure the outcomes will not put women in danger. Therefore, there is a need for cooperation between social protection programs for women and climate adaptation programs. And a senior lecturer explained also in the webinar his name is a bit difficult to pronounce, is Sheikh Eskander. He explained that we need to change a few things, and some key recommendations were made about how the situation for women in the access to finance can be improved. Among those recommendations, the allowance of repayments of loans to be delayed after a shock, involving women in policymaking, improving the access to formal or official loans to women, which tend to have lowest interest rates than the microcredits they have access to, track loans in times of emergency. The webinar provided no perfect and no perfectly replicable solution to the issue of gender inequality in social protection and in the context of climate change in developing countries, but it made me want to look a bit deeper at the way women are affected by climate change differently than men, and as was mentioned by the expert present that day. So the International Panel on Climate Change found that gender inequalities are further exaggerated by climate-related hazards, and they result in higher workloads for women, occupational hazard indoors and outdoors, psychological and emotional stress, and higher mortality compared to men. Basically, climate outcomes or climate change comes with an extra workload for women, spending hours taking care of sodden towels and cleaning them by hand, drying them, carrying containers of water into the kitchen, bathing children in buckets, or washing floors with rainwater collected in cans is exhausting and demoralizing. Women are in charge of gathering the food, the water, and household energy resources. And as drought worsen and forests burn, they have to travel further distances and spend more time acquiring all those resources. Finances are also hit hard in the context of climate change for women. And this situation is explained by the globalcitizen.org website, as they have to provide the resources for their household. The women are denied property rights in half of the countries of the world. They are often barred from borrowing money for fertilizers and tools, which prevent them from successfully guiding their crops to harvest. They also can have trouble accessing markets to sell the harvest. And as women live with fewer financial means, female-headed households tend to be poorer and thus more vulnerable to climate change with precarious housing. Therefore, they are more susceptible to climate-related displacement or early, or as we say, child marriage. Female migrants are also most of the time forced to stop their education, and this is the case for twice as more women than men, or girls than boys, and this perpetuates this financial vulnerability. Those are only examples of how climate change affects women more strongly than men. So we see how both social protection as well as climate mitigation and adaptation programs need to collaborate. All these programs, they have to apply a gender lens to their strategy, because climate change does not affect women and men equally. And this is due to the social role women have in society. That's why the idea to aim at gender equity more than gender equality with these programs. Makes sense. Well, I hope I could give you an idea of why climate change and gender inequalities need to be faced together. See you soon on the blog.